we've already heard Achilles being called Olbios. And of course, we're now very aware that there are two levels of meaning for Olbios. One meaning for those who are initiated, another meaning for those who are not. But is this going to work the same way when the same word, Olbios, is applied to Odysseus? It's one thing to apply it to Achilles, who's already dead. And there he is, or should I say, there is his psukhe, the disembodied conveyor of his identity, in Hades, which is this transitional place, if my reading is right. And sure, if Agamemnon says to Achilles, when they're both dead, that Achilles is Olbios, you figure that maxim that says, count no man Olbios until he's dead, will surely apply. And then, in that case, in a sense, Achilles is being pegged as a cult hero. But here, in this passage, if Odysseus is called Olbios, well, he's not yet dead, and he's certainly not in Hades, and yet the psukhe of Agamemnon addresses him in absence and calls him Olbios. So it's almost like a prophecy. Sure, we can imagine Odysseus becoming a cult hero and qualifying as Olbios after he's dead, but he's still somewhere up in the land of the living, and Agamemnon's psukhe is already calling him Olbios. So let's just examine how this might cause some tensions as we go through this passage line by line. And I love the way Odysseus is immediately described as a trickster, which is not a typically epic quality, or we don't think of heroes, let's say, in the Iliad as tricksters. And you and I could say a lot about tricksters from an anthropological point of view, but I'll just leave it at this for now, is that this is a different kind of hero, this Odysseus, than is Achilles. And then there's all of this self-conscious reference to what I say is true, and it's really this way. It's truly with great merit that you got to have your wife. And he's saying that because he's already made a contrast between his wife and the wife of Odysseus. And you could say, well, Agamemnon's wife is directly responsible for the failed nostos of Agamemnon, whereas Odysseus's wife is directly responsible for the successful nostos of Odysseus. And the thinking here is very clear then. And there has been a lot of controversy about the expression with great merit. In the original Greek, it's very clear that that has to go with the verb. It cannot go with the noun. Although in English we could say things like a wife with great merit. In Greek you can't do that, or at least not this way. So the arete, the merit, is being assigned to Odysseus, even though he's simply the beneficiary of the merit of his wife, Penelope. We'll get back to that. And then he goes on to say in line 194, for the thinking of faultless Penelope was sound, she, now I go to 195, she kept Odysseus well in mind. And then in the next line, we start hearing about the glory of Odysseus that will never perish. And it's clear that really Odysseus owes his kleos and his nostos to Penelope. The question is then, can we say that Penelope also has kleos?
Right. And it's dependent upon her phrenes, her thinking, right?
And
like so
thinking.
much in the Odyssey.
And it's a kind of quality that matches so symmetrically the quality of Odysseus himself. So these two, this man and this woman, they're really very well matched because they're both paragons of intelligence. then we have the self-conscious reference to the kind of glory that is not just there for the heroes of the past, but that will keep reverberating into the present. So whenever the Iliad or the Odyssey are performed, it's still that same glory, and in fact it's revived again and again in performance.
And it's that reverberation that you're saying with, and a song will be created for earthbound mortals, right?
Yes.
That's a reverberation.
Yes, and it's a prophecy, it's a prediction, and it's something that has a great deal of beauty and pleasure, and all of this build up to then go to the other extreme, Clytemnestra, who messed up everything for her husband, and how that song will be a hateful subject. And it almost implies that this is a folkloristic motif that will give women a bad name forever and ever and ever. And we do have this kind of misogynistic thread in men's songs about women. Not that this is of any comfort to us, but there's also the opposite, where there are all sorts of man-hating traditions sung by women. And when I say woman-hating and man-hating, it's more like an experimentation in a full range of emotions. So at least I don't take this as a sign that whoever composed this was himself or herself somehow afflicted with all sorts of psychological problems, being unable to relate to, in one case men, and in another case women. But there it is.
So can I ask two things?
Please.
So twice now you've mentioned the word prophecy.
Yes.
So and we're talking about the fact that the people who are thinking about the hero
Yes.
are very important in ensuring the kleos of the hero. So
Very.
I'd like to ask about those two things.
Good.
And also I'd like to follow up on what you're just saying about the relationship between men and women. So I think what you're pointing towards is a certain kind of, the way that Odysseus and Penelope are sort of in sync here.
Yes,
So is
exactly.
what is being pointed out here, is this sort of the ideal? So you're saying sometimes it's viewed one way in a negative way, the relationship between men and women,
Got
but
it.
this is something special?
I think you nailed it. So let me answer your first question, or at least let me play with the framework of your first question. Yes, I think there is a contract between the time of the heroic age and the time of the present, when the Iliad and the Odyssey are being performed. A time that keeps shifting forward and forward in time, of course, but it's as if there were these 2 points, the past and the present, and kleos has to interact with both. And then what you said about man-hating and woman-hating discourse, and how that's something that you see in ancient Greek song culture. And if you were an anthropologist, you could say, oh, well, this is part of the human experience, that in the whole range of expressing human emotions, you can have situations where men hate women and women hate men. But here's a couple, Odysseus and Penelope, who, when everything clicks, not only don't hate each other, they love each other and they work well with each other, they promote each other's arete, or momentum for accomplishment, and they promote each other's kleos, so that the kleos of Odysseus has to be shared with Penelope. And of course it goes the other way around.
So then if we're taking it to a frame of the relationship maybe within cult worship,
Yes.
so then is there a relationship then between the class of the hero and the class of the participants who have to keep their phrenes on the hero?
Absolutely, because I go back to this concept of the contract between the present and the past. If you're really going to connect with the heroic past, you've got to take the good parts and then be very afraid of the bad parts, of course. But when you take the good parts, there are all sorts of ways to apply it. And it's a form of modeling, although I don't want to describe heroes as simply positive role models for us humans, because larger than life as they are, they can make even bigger mistakes than we could ever dream of. But the story itself, let's put the characters sort of off to the side. The story itself is teaching and all sorts of very valuable lessons about human relations. And it's the story that is the model building and is the way we can test how their behavior and our behavior are comparable. Not so much that they're these fixed characters and some are good, some are bad, some are lovable, some are hateful. That is an oversimplified way of reading it.